This is a video demonstrating how to work corrugated ribbing with knit 2, purl 2 pattern. This is for the cuff of a sock. So I've got 64 stitches cast on here, divided equally onto 2 needles, 32 stitches on each needle, and I'm going to show how to join in the round in just a second. When you have a design that is a multiple of 4, like knit 2, purl 2 ribbing, you need to have a multiple of 4 stitches cast on your needles. So thus we have 64 stitches here. You could do it with 60, 56, 68, etc. So first we're going to just join in the round. We have the last cast on stitch on this needle. This was the first cast on stitch, so we want to join between the last and the first. And the good rule of thumb is that you just know that the working yarn is going to be coming off of the needle that you just finished working on. You're not going to knit back on that needle, otherwise you wouldn't be knitting in the round. So we're going to push this section of stitches up onto the needle. The yarn's not attached to. That's where we're going to start knitting, and we want to see that our stitches are not twisted. So we want all of the cast on edge facing each other like this. They're not twisted. If they do happen to twist, it can be fixed after the first round, so don't fret too much about it. Now the first thing we're going to do is just knit one round with the dark color. And you know, corrugated ribbing is worked with 2 colors of yarn. The first 2 stitches are going to be tight here so that we have a nice join, and then the rest are worked with normal tension. Corrugated ribbing is a 2-color type of knitting, so we're going to have 2 colors, a dark color and a light color. This is the dark color. So I'm going just to knit all the way around. We'll cut to that, and I'll see you in a second. So at this point I have my cast on stitches and have knitted one round all the way around. I'm double checking to make sure that I don't have any twists, and it looks good. If you do have a twist at this point, since there's just one strand right here that connects this needle to this one, this is where you could untwist it. It would untwist there and it would not be noticeable. So you can fix it after the first round if there's a twist. After the second round, it's a bit too late. So at this point we're going to add in our second color. My second color is going to be this light yellow. And I'm going to first demonstrate how to work holding one yarn in each hand. So I'm going to anchor the yellow yarn over here along the needle so that I can get some tension on it when I put it in my right hand. I've got my needle here. I tension my yellow yarn. I'm set to go. So we're going to start out, we're going to work 2 stitches in yellow in the knit. Oops. Helps if you wrap it around the needle. 2 knit. So we've got the yellow started. Now we're going to bring the dark yarn forward and do 2 purls. Dark yarn back, 2 knits. So the yarn, when you're floating the yarn across the back, which that's what it's called when you're just letting it sit back there while you work with the other color, you want to make sure it's always to the back and never to the front. Then you bring the yarn forward, purl 2. Now if we didn't take this yarn to the back and we went ahead and knitted like this, then this yarn would be floating across the front of the work and it would be visible. We don't want that, so we want to take it to the back. Then we work the knits. Another thing you'll notice with stranded knitting is that you are creating those floats across the back. You can easily see the light yellow floats, and then that turquoise is the dark float. We're making another float here. You don't want those to be tight. If they are tight, if you don't allow enough space, you will not be able to get the sock cuff over your heel when you're trying it on. So the way that I keep those from being too short is I'm constantly stretching these stitches down this needle as I knit. So Here's the last light color. The next one's going to be over here. I stretch these stitches down the needle so that this yarn, the light color, has to go all the way up here before it makes the next stitch, and that makes that float right here on the back. It's better to have it too long than too short. Then when you're making the next stitch, there's no float. Now the dark color is going to be floating. It's going to be going from this color, from this stitch all the way over to this stitch. So I pull these stitches back and I make that next purl while I'm holding those stitches back so that it makes sure that the float is long. Make the second one, move the yarn to the back. After you work a few rounds of this, you'll need to try it on to make sure your floats are long enough. If they're not, you'll need to start over, unfortunately. Blocking it will not make the floats longer, so you can't count on that. And you just go in this process, just like this, to make your ribbing. So I'm going to complete this round, and then I'm going to do another round showing a different way to hold the yarn. So now we've gone around one time in our color work using both the light and the dark yarn, alternating every 2 stitches. And we're going to start the next round. Once you've done one round, it still isn't going to look real tidy. It looks a little bit loose and sloppy, but that's okay. That will tidy up as we get going. So a couple more things to talk about before I show a different way of holding the yarn, and that is, one, you always want to keep the same colors in the same hands when you're working with 2 yarns. For example, I have the dark yarn in my left hand. I never want to switch it to the right hand. I'm always going to keep it in the left hand. And I've got the light color in my right hand, and it's always going to stay in the right hand. That's very important. Another thing is when you're changing from needle to needle in stranded knitting, because these floats travel across this join. For example, the yellow, you can see, is going to be coming from this 3rd stitch here over to the 1st stitch over here. And if you pull that too tight, you're actually going to make a permanent crease where the 2 needles come together that will not block out of your knitting. So in stranded knitting, you have to be careful to not pull the yarns too tight when you're joining from one needle to the other. Versus when you're working with one color, you always want to make those tight. So I have a little trick that I do, and that is we have these stitches on one needle, these on the other needle. I bring the other needle, I bend it around the corner, and I hold it here with my thumb so that the stitches from the row that we just completed, these tails are in the way, it kind of makes it look messy, but you'll get the idea. So here's the yellow yarn. It's coming from this stitch, then the 2 dark, and we're going to work a yellow one here. So I've got this extra cord from the other needle under my thumb here, and that holds the fabric out to the side here so that you can keep that stitch a distance away from this stitch so they don't end up being too tight. So here we go. See, we've got it clear out here. We're going to start the first knit stitch, and we keep that space so that that float does not get tight across the corner. And then start right in with our color. After I've worked a few stitches, I can let go of that cable, or you can just keep holding it there if it's convenient for you. I hold it there for a while so that it doesn't flip-flop around and get in my way. And I'm still stretching these stitches back on the right needle as I go. After you practice that, you can pick up some speed. It goes pretty quickly. I love holding one yarn in each hand. It just works out so well. But it does take practice if you're not used to doing it. Okay, I'm going to finish this round, then I'll show you how to hold the yarns in a different way. Okay, so we finished the first 2 rounds, and we're starting to see the pattern of the corrugated ribbing, the knits and purls. It's going to be very pretty. So now we're going to start the 3rd round. This time I'm going to show how to hold the yarn, just holding it in one hand, 1 yarn at a time. I'm still going to bring this cable around here so that the spacing is good. We're going to have the left yarn, the dark yarn to the left, the light yarn to the right. So I actually have the right yarn ball over here on the right side, and the dark yarn ball is over here on the left side, and they are never going to cross. So we're going to start out, we need to have the light yarn for the first 2 stitches, so we're going to pick up the light yarn, hold it in our our left hand, and we're going to knit those first 2 stitches. And then we're going to drop that color, keeping it over to the right, pick up the dark color from the left, bring it forward, and purl the next 2 stitches. We're still doing all of the part of moving the stitches down the needle over here. After we purl, we drop that to the left, pick this one up from the right, I had to move my yarn a little bit, and knit 2. Drop that to the right, pick this color up from the left, purl 2, drop that to the left, pick this color up from the right, knit 2. And if you hold the yarn in the other hand, you would do the same thing, just using your other hand, but you would always keep the yarns on their respective sides. They should never twist, they should never tangle, and they shouldn't cross on the back of the work. So our floats look like this. They're perfectly straight. They're not twisting around each other. They're just going straight across the back of the work. So if you've never done corrugated ribbing, or you've never worked with 2 colors of yarn in the same row, sometimes it's easiest just to do that, to use 1 color at a time. Some people will also use 2 yarns over 1 finger, and you can do that also. So you would just simply, for example, if you were using your left hand, you would wrap these around your finger together, or you could wrap them around and put 1 on each of 2 fingers, like this. So you have to tighten this one up. So you'd have 1 yarn on that finger and 1 yarn on that finger, and you can choose which one you want to work with. Or you can do the same thing in your right hand. After you've done your rounds of ribbing, this is 14 rounds of ribbing after the first cast on row and that first row of plain all knits. This is what it looks like. Of course, you would be working it in this direction, so the knits are going this way. This is your cast on edge. And you can see that it does have some stretch. It's not near as stretchy as regular ribbing, so that's why you have to be really careful that these floats do not get tight. The floats need to be able to stretch on the inside. So after you've done a few rows, stop and try it on. Make sure it'll go over your heel. There you go. Happy knitting.